Thank you for listening to CFCR 90.5 FM and welcome to this hour's program, Classical Connection. I'm your host, Joey Zhang, and for the first half hour today, we have a very special guest with us, clarinetist, soloist, composer, and improviser, Kinan Azmeh. Originally from Syria, Kinan Azmeh brings his music to all corners of the world. He appeared as a soloist with the New York Philharmonic, London Philharmonic, Seattle Symphony, Winnipeg Symphony, Toronto Symphony, Calgary Philharmonic, among many others, and has shared the stage with musical luminaries as Yo-Yo Ma, Daniel Bourbihan, and more. As a composer, Kinan's composition includes several works for solo, chamber, and orchestra music, as well as music for film, live illustration, and electronics. His works are commissioned by orchestras around the world, including the New York Philharmonic and the Seattle Symphony. In addition to his own Arab jazz quartet city band and his Hewar trio, is that the right pronunciation?
That's correct, yes.
He has also been a member of Yo-Yo Ma's Silk Road Ensemble since 2012, whose 2017 Grammy Award-winning album, Sing Me Home, features Kinan as a clarinetist and composer, and he has recently been appointed to National Council for the Arts on a nomination by President Joe Biden. Thank you so much for being here, Kinan.
Thank you very much for having me, Joey. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to see you. I was wondering, let's open up with a more general question. Growing up with the influence of, if you would say, Western classical music and Arabic music in your family, and without any formal training in jazz, I'm curious, would you say in your upbringing as a musician, you always knew you wanted to be a clarinet soloist / composer / improviser?
It's hard to tell. It's been way too many years back now, But I know that I enjoyed doing a variety of things. I enjoyed performing, I enjoyed playing, and I was encouraged by my parents to start to compose at an early age. And I think that's where improvisation and composition are, two sides of the same coin in a way. Because sometimes I would pick up my instrument and try to, invent few notes here and there. And sometimes I would hold a pen and a paper and just to write down thoughts. Did I think I'll be a professional musician? No. But did I enjoy it? Yes, I enjoyed it fully. Sometimes also I didn't when it was just an additional homework, when I just present to prepare for exams and stuff. But I grew up in a household that embraced cultures, and I emphasized the S, the plural S at the end of culture. We listen to lots of music, Arabic music, jazz, classical music, you name it. And I guess now what I do is a natural extension of that, of how I grew up thinking that the world is my playground, if you want, culturally. Oh. And I enjoy now a variety of things, not only in music, but also in cuisine, in dance, in theater, in literature. Try to be as, wide of a spectrum as I can.
Absolutely. And at what point did you decide to say, I want to commit to music?
There's a slight difference between committing and realizing that you are able to commit. I think the moment when you start developing a natural love for the instrument and the craft itself, when you produce a sound that will move you, you are emotionally committed. You love it. It's that's the most important part of committing to something. When you love it and you're very passionate about it. But there's a realistic part of it where, am I gonna be making a living out of this? And that came naturally. Mm-hmm. Because of the passion and the maybe you become almost like blinded by love, so you just pursue it, not knowing the risks that you are going through or you're gonna face when you become a professional musician. But it just happened naturally. I finished my high school and I did a double degree in electronics engineering and music. And when I finished from both, when I finished from both, I found myself applying to grad schools in music only. And I think that's when the commitment crystallized the most. And that's when I came to the US to do my master's and then later on my doctorate. And then New York City sucked me in like it does to many other people. So here I am.
it's really cool to see another musician who's also started not necessarily like with doing other things. And at least for me, I see a similar experience where I was having music as a hobby-ish and being very passionate about it. And then at some point I decide this is the bigger part of me and I cannot live without it. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's natural. I don't know how it would be otherwise because I didn't live that. Some people maybe when they're very, very young, they realize this is the only thing they want to do. I never got to that point, to be honest. Like even today, yes, music is a huge part of my life, and it's the way I express myself the best and the most in the most efficient way. But is it the only thing I enjoy in life? Certainly not. I enjoy going out in nature. I enjoy, playing soccer. I enjoy reading books. So music, yes, is an important element, but it's not the only thing. And I think for a child, at age 6 or 7, to decide like I want to do only one thing. I mean, I have a son who is 3 years old right now, and if he says in a couple of years he wants to do only, I don't know, tennis, for example, I would encourage him. I mean, I would not discourage him, but I would encourage him to include other things in his life because I think life has more avenues than just one thing. Certainly, we can enjoy a variety of things without compromising the quality with which we're enjoying all of these different things.
Oh, for sure. And it helps shape, who you are as a musician. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think everything spills over. Now when I compose, maybe some of my engineering background spills into the music I'm writing. It's hard to know if it's the other way around because I didn't work as an engineer. But it's good to think of how you can live a very fully, like a full life and a wholesome life. And I think you have to be in touch with physics and music and literature and humans and nature. You have to try to do it all because life has so much to offer.
Absolutely. Now, as a musician, fellow musician, I wonder, what's your warm-up routine looking like? Do you start already with improvisation in your life? And you already touch on kind of where everything in life is where you're grabbing, but is that where you're grabbing your musical inspiration from as well? Where and what? Yeah.
There are different ways. When I'm not on tour, and I'm on tour almost 6 or 7 months a year, I'm like, playing with different orchestras. When I'm home, uh, my practice usually sometimes I just do warm-ups like I would do in the gym, really. It's just like working on fingers and just to gain even more fluidity with playing. And sometimes I'm just obsessed with the musical idea that I wanna find a place for in my composition. So it's not really about the instrument. It happens often that where I don't play at all in a few days just because I'm busy composing. And sometimes if I'm learning a new piece, including pieces that I've written for myself, because I write usually with paper and pen. It's not that I hold the instrument and I see what I can play and then I would write it down. It's not that. And then I have to sit and practice parts like everybody else. So I don't have a standardized way of approaching music making. Certainly not in my day-to-day kind of routine. But when I get obsessed with an idea, with a compositional idea, I try to immediately improvise on that idea and see how I can flip this idea around, how I can reverse it, what happens if I transpose it to different intervals. So it becomes a natural way of me uh, kind of working on some motivic development on a very small musical device.
Yeah.
And that helps me tremendously, both technically on the instrument, but also in my writing in general.
Absolutely. It's cool to hear, sometimes it's cool to hear that the other side in the practice room is not just the scales, not just the technique. There is that, but there's much more creativity and ideas of that. if you
I'm
would
not
say.
saying that scales are not important, but
No, no.
if you any piece of music, it has so many arpeggios, it has so many scales, it has so many things built in already. If you're learning a piece by Debussy, for example, just see what happens if you try to transpose a little phrase just up and down a half step. Suddenly, it creates a huge amount of challenge for you, you know. But also trying to transpose on the spot and then play the same motif backwards, and you end up with something totally else. And your fingers will gain also a lot of mobility too while you do that. But
Absolutely.
again, I'm not undermining how important it is to do the standard practice when you just do the scales. People have to do that, and I did that, obviously, growing up. But now I try to be more, it's not about efficiency. I try to enjoy more. I think there's something, if you practice playing like a lick, quote unquote, of Debussy or Brahms, it might be more exciting than just playing a scale.
Yes. So this Saturday will be your first time performing on clarinet with the SSO, the Saskatoon Symphony, at TCU Theater on your composition suite for Improvising and Orchestra. We're very excited to have you. Could you
Thank
talk?
you.
Yeah, could you talk about the piece a little bit and share some of your favorite moments in the three-movement piece with our listeners?
Absolutely. The piece itself, first of all, I'm very excited to be joining the orchestra and to play this piece. It's my first time in your province, so in Saskatoon, first time with the orchestra. So I'm really excited for this new collaboration, and I'm happy to be bringing a piece that really took me around the world. Really, I wrote this piece for myself because there are many things I wanted to do. I wanted to play as solos with orchestras, I wanted to compose, and I wanted to improvise. So I decided to write a piece for myself that serves all these different purposes. So, and the piece is an older piece of mine. It was written somewhere between 2006 to 2008, and now I cannot name like one moment. I enjoy the ride, and I hope the audience will enjoy the ride. It's kind of it's a dialogue, a musical dialogue that is between the orchestra, the soloist, and the conductor. And it's a piece where the rhythm section of the orchestra, which is the basses and the percussion, serve as the beating heart of the piece. So the three movements are groove based, if you want, with exciting meters. For example, the middle movement is in 21/16, which is not a very conventional meter. And the last movement is in 15/8, which also has this odd meter kind of feel. But it's a celebration of the whole piece at large, is a celebration and a questioning of what home means and how it means different things to different people, and how in my own journey, how I keep trying to define that. And I think a piece of music might be better suited for that than me talking about it. So I invite the audience to come and just enjoy the interaction between what's happening on stage, but also there's another level of interaction, which is maybe even more important, between the musicians on stage and the audience who are listening, because I would like the audience to also to be able to create their own narrative of what they hear, and I hope they will find home in that piece as well.
Oh, that's so great. We're very excited to hear. Speaking about on stage and the improvisation that's happening on stage, you talk a little bit about being with the rhythm in the orchestra. I wonder generally where these ideas come from. Is it from a line of notes, a rhythm, or is it from a collection of ideas that you've experimented in the preparational stage?
I think it's all of them. Sometimes, and it happened actually often, well, not often, at least happened a couple of times, where I was playing in an improvised section in the piece, and where somebody's phone started ringing in the audience, and I ended up just riffing off that. You hear something. One time, actually, there was a crying baby, and this happened recently. Actually, it was in Canada somewhere. And it was beautiful because this baby has just like made two sounds, two very distinct notes, and that became like a platform for me to just play over these two notes. And I had a little dialogue with a baby who's not even one, who was at the concert. So sometimes it's that, sometimes it's just inspired by by I mean, not all my part is improvised. I've written a part for myself, but since then I rarely play that. Sometimes I play little melodies here and there, but for the rest I'm improvising based on these melodies, but also based on the interpretation of the orchestra. And I try to challenge myself, because I played this piece many times. I challenge myself to really to bring something new and a fresh perspective to this piece, as if it is the first time I play it. And for that, you have to just keep a fresh mindset in a way, and just go with the flow and see where the piece takes you.
Absolutely. This leads to my next question, actually. It's about risk taking in improvisation. So, like you said, every performance is different, and it's a fresh idea every time. How often does your musical idea come out differently from how you envision it, and how do you deal with that?
I enjoy it. That's the only way I know how to do it. You know, uh, we use the word risk taking in the in the industry, or in the music making aspect. I mean, at the end of the day, the word risk is too much. Our profession is a very friendly profession. It's all about pleasure. It's about enjoying a wide spectrum of human emotions, and risk is not part of that. Nobody's gonna die because if you play the wrong note. Nobody's gonna be injured. If you put that into perspective, we are all on stage together with the audience to enjoy seeing somebody being moved by what they create, and by extension, they move the audience, right? So nothing can go wrong. I mean, so I don't know. Maybe you are sick in the middle of the performance, and then the performance stops. But even that's not a major issue in my perspective. So when you're playing, the only thing I think about is I would like to enjoy this, and for me to enjoy it, I don't think of risk anymore. I just play what I like to play. I play what I like to hear also. And if there's a wrong note, you try to find a way to make it correct, which means you create the context around it. Sometimes simply by repeating it, and then it becomes part of the vocabulary you're using. And I try to enjoy the music making is about channeling your most sincere sense of self, and it's the best way to communicate with the world, I feel. And in that way, I don't think there's any risk with that.
That's a really good way to put it, instead of, whoops, that wasn't what I wanted it to be, but you embraced it and leaning into it almost.
Like, the only problem actually I can imagine, and that's something that worries me sometimes, if I ever feel bored playing, that's a problem. It didn't happen yet. It never happened. The moment I breathe into my instrument, and a note comes out, I'm still fascinated by the physics of it too. Like, I put some air in the instrument and it starts to speak.
Yeah.
And so I think the moment the performer is bored being on stage, they should take a break from the stage until the excitement is back. Because otherwise, you just become, you're just doing like autopilot kind of performance, which will have no soul. And I try to be in touch with my soul as much as possible. For me, in order for me to be able to touch other people's souls, I have to be in touch with mine first, I guess.
That's really beautifully said. This reminds me of, I was watching you having an interview with Jeremy Chapman in 2021. And then you discuss about you were in this recording projects, and afterwards you listened back. And at the time, some of the recorded takes you prefer was actually a reflection of somebody else's playing. And there were some takes that you did not like at the time, but you were told by somebody else that it was actually a reflection of your own style of playing, and a sort of like self-expression. And so as you spend more and more time being a soloist and on stage and improvising, are you actively pushing yourself as much as possible, or are there scenarios you would choose to be the other way?
I mean, just to just to go back to what you said first, that was actually a friend of mine who said, what you said was, what he said is, in an improvised context, takes that you usually hate as a recording artist are usually how you are really. And that's where you put the standards very high on yourself because you know how you play. And the takes you hate are usually ones it could have been better because you can do it. And solos that you usually love at first time are usually ones that remind you of somebody else you admire or you admire their playing.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's like making music or recording or even performance, a live performance, is just a document of time in the time of today. Like if I record an album now, it doesn't have to be relevant for me throughout my life. It doesn't have to be the best thing I've ever done. I think it can simply be, this is how I thought at this given year or given month in my life, and it's a document of the time. And when you move forward, you look to the future, and you don't want to repeat that. That's for me my main motivation is I don't want to just be stuck with how I used to play. Maybe some of it is great. I don't mean to dismiss it either. But for me to move forward, meaning I would like to acquire new vocabulary, I would like to develop my vocabulary more. And it's not about pushing oneself, because pushing also has a lot of, I don't enjoy being pushed.
Mm-hmm.
I would like things to happen naturally because I like to. So sometimes I push myself because it's excites me to do so, to create a new kind of vocabulary for me to play with. But sometimes it's simple and meaningful enough to just play a simple melody without having to push anything. Because music is not only about pushing, it's about enjoying. And I like to enjoy also what I'm simply playing.
Thank you. So I find as a classically trained flutist, improvising and simply composing helps me to expand and explore my creativity and discover more what we can do. So for the music lovers that are listening out there, could you suggest a fun and simple activity that a person can do in a day-to-day life to cultivate creativity even without their instrument or with one?
There's actually this, I think, activity can work for musicians and non-musicians alike. When I give master classes for improvisation, and I do that often, I ask people, see how you can fill a space. And in music, a space is, let's say, 1 minute. Can you create a meaningful sentence using only 4 words, for example? And can you keep creating all different possibilities within 1 minute? And with musicians, can you actually create a micro piece of 1 minute just using 3 notes or 2 notes or even 1 note? And you realize at the end of this exercise that even if you just play one very long note on the flute, for example, it's not static, and that's what's exciting about us being like humans who are performing, is that it's not automatic, and it's not the same. It starts soft, maybe the note will grow louder a tiny little bit, and then it gets soft again, and then it stops. And you realize the moment you stop blowing in the instrument, the sound dies. All of us, I think, with no tools whatsoever, can improvise, and we improvise in real life. Like this conversation between you and I is improvised. I have my thoughts, you have your thoughts, but we're improvising together. And the only difference between this and music making, and that's where music has advantage, is you and I can talk and listen to each other at the same time in music. While here in this interview, when I speak, you don't speak. When you speak, I don't speak. But in music, we're immediately able to accommodate each other without even knowing each other, but just by hearing how we're playing, to play together. So I think improvisation is in everything we do, and people should not think that improvisers are different and there's a technique that is special. It's not. We do this in life all the time. And the moment, if you play like an instrument as a beginner, let's say, hold your instrument for 1 minute and play anything that comes to mind. Don't follow your fingers. Try to follow what your brain is telling you to do, and see if you're gonna enjoy what you hear. I think the more you do it, the more you'll start to enjoy what your brain is telling you.
Thank you so much, Kinan, for sharing your thoughts. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you for those who have been listening. This is CFCR 90.5 FM, and my name is Joey Zhang on Classical Connection with our guest Kinan Azmeh. On the evening of Saturday, March 2nd, we'll have Kinan joining us at TCU Place with the Saskatoon Symphony, performing his own suite for Improvisor and Orchestra. In the same concert, the Saskatoon Symphony will be performing 3 other works. One of them is by Canadian composer Kelly Marie Murphy, named Curiosity, Genius, and the Search for Petula Clark, following with Pelléas et Mélisande, a beautiful work by Gabriel Fauré, and Symphonic Minutes by Ernest d'Artagnan. We'll listen to selected recording from this Saturday's work in the second half, and if you're interested in following the playlist, you can search on Spotify with Joey's Classical Connection. We'll be right back after listening to some messages from our sponsors. Thank you.